welcome back to another video in our web design course. In this video, we're going to be looking at your padding, your borders, and then your margin. So I have pulled up here the code from the previous video, which again, we just have an index.html. In the body, we have a div and then a bunch of p tags with all of our different color types. And then in our styles.css, we're just simply assigning colors in different ways to those. Now let's pick one of these, maybe the second one, this purple color by RGB. And when I look at this, one of the first things I notice is if you scroll in, this C is pretty much right up against that gray line there where the gray meets the red border. And that it looks really bad. So we want to fix that. We want to add kind of an indentation to separate the text from the edge of the div. And the way that we can do that is with something called padding. So if I come in here and add a padding value, or rather add a padding left value, then what I can do is I can hand it a number, so maybe 8 pixels. And again, I can do pixels, I can do EM, I can do rem. I'll just do pixels for now to keep it simple. If I do 8 pixels and then save that, now you can see my color by RGB has been indented a little bit. But if I have padding on the left, I want it to match on the right, probably. So how do I add padding on the right? Well, I can say padding right, and then we'll set that to 8 pixels too. And you can't really see anything that happened, but let me show you what happened. So if I come down here and add a border to this, and this is just shorthand for a border, and if I say border 2 pixels, and then we want a solid line and we want it to be black. Now I have a border all the way around there. And this padding on the right actually hasn't really done much because it's applied it way over here because we're using a p tag. So let's change that, come back in here, find the second one that we're modifying, change that to a span tag, and then save that. And you see the border has shrunk to the side or to the size of the text, but it's left 8 pixels on the left and on the right. Well, what if we want a border on the top and the bottom too? Well, we could come in here, or not a border, padding rather. We could come in here and say border top is equal to 4 pixels, and then padding bottom is also equal to 4 pixels. And then if we save that, you see now we get a 4 pixel padding on both the top and the bottom. And by the way, if you look on here, if you actually click here and then come down here, if we click in here, let's highlight this span. So if we open our body and then inside of our div, let's find this span. And if you click on that span, now you can see here in the middle, we have our actual text where it says color by RGB. And then if I go out a little bit into this padding area, you can see now everything that's highlighted in the box down here is my padding, and it tells me what it is with 8 pixels, 4 pixels, 8 pixels, 4 pixels. But also you'll notice as I hover over that, it's going to highlight that padding on the element itself. And then outside of the padding, you have your border. And the border here is 2 pixels all the way around. So you can see 2 pixels on every side. And basically this box down here is just showing us the layout of the element that we have selected right now, which happens to be that span. And you'll notice outside of the border, there's a margin. So basically your padding is going to be the gap or the space that's left between the start of your text and the outside of the element. So in this case, the padding is padding this color by RGB text from the edge of the span text that it's inside of. And then the border goes right around the outside of that span text, and that's the outermost part of that span text. And if I was to add margin in here, so I could say margin top is 10 pixels. Now save that. Now you can see I have a margin top, or I have 10 pixels for my margin on the top, which you can't really see. So maybe let's change that to left just so you can see that a little bit better. And you can see now it's jumped in 10 pixels from the left. So basically, the padding is going to be empty space left inside the element. The border is going to be, exactly what it says, on the border of the element. And then the margin is going to be the space outside of the element between that and the next element. So now, if I were to come in here and say, okay, well, this is kind of a lot to write for this padding, right? This is one element. And to put padding all the way around, I had to write 4 separate lines. So there's actually a shorthand way of doing this. Instead of doing padding left, right, top, and bottom, I can simply just write padding. And if I do it this way, then I can simply just start from the top and go clockwise. So if I say 4 pixels, 8 pixels, 4 pixels, 8 pixels, and if I save that, now that's going to give me, oh, with a semicolon after that. If I save that, now that's going to give me the exact and then 8 pixels. Now if I save that, you can see that gives me the exact same thing where we have 4 on the top and the bottom and then 8 on the sides. Another thing I can do, if I just leave 2 values in here, say I put just 4 pixels and 4 pixels and then save that, you can see that it's going to apply 4 pixels on the top and the bottom and then 4 pixels on the left and the right. But if I instead change this to 8 pixels and 4 pixels, well, now it's applied 8 pixels on the top and the bottom and 4 pixels on the left and the right. So these are just different shorthand ways of writing it, so you don't have to do 4 lines for your padding every time, especially if you're going to be mirroring your values either all the way around it or on the left and right and top and bottom. And you can do the same thing with the margin. So if we come down here and instead of saying margin left, we say margin, and then we can simply do 10 pixels, 20 pixels, 30 pixels, and 40 pixels. If I save that now, if you look down here in our box, you can see we have 10 pixels on the top, we have 20 pixels on the side, we have 30 pixels on the bottom, and then we have 40 pixels on the left side. So that's just going to go the same thing. The first value is the top, then that's going to be the right, then that's going to be the bottom, and then finally this one is going to be the left side. Now at this point, you might actually notice that if you look here, it says we actually have margin 10 on the top and 30 on the bottom. But as I highlight here, you see I have the box all the way around down in the DevTools. But if I look up on my Chrome window itself, I don't have any margin on the top and on the bottom there. And that is basically because we turned this into a span text. And a span text, it's an inline element as opposed to a block HTML element, which means you actually can't apply vertical margin on that. So there is no top and bottom margin. But if I come back to here, and if I change the span text back to a p text, which this paragraph is going to be a block item or a block element instead, well, now if I look here, you can see that I actually have my margin, and the margin on that one, let's go back in there. So if I go into my div, this is going to be my second P class. So now if I look there, I have my margin and it goes all the way around. And basically for an inline HTML element, you can have margin on the left and on the right, but you can't have it on the top and the bottom. So just keep that in mind when you're planning out what elements to use and deciding whether you want to use margin or padding or spans or Ps or whatever you want there. Just keep in mind that margin for inline elements can only be horizontal. You can't add vertical margin there. Now, moving on, the next thing we have here, we've gone over padding, we've gone over margin, and again, you can set them all individually, or you can set them all together like that, and it'll go clockwise, or you can set them like this, 10 pixels, 20 pixels, and now if I save that, you can see my the 10 pixels, the first one here is the top and the bottom, and then the 20 pixels is going to be the left and the right. So that's another shorthand way of doing that. And then we have this border class here. So let's say we want to take another one, and we have no border yet. So let's add some padding to this top one. And I'm just going to say padding all around is going to be 4 pixels just to give it just a tiny bit of padding. Save that, and you see it indents it just a little bit. We want to add a border to that. We can come in here and we can say border width, and let's just say we want it to be 2 pixels. Now, if we were to save that, you can see nothing has changed because we can't just hand it a width. We have to hand it a style and then a color along with that. So I can say border style, and if I can say dash, dotted, double. There's a whole bunch of different things you can choose here. Let's just choose double for that. And then finally, we have to give it a color. So I can say border color is equal to purple. Whoops. Border color colon purple. So now if I save that, you can see we have this double line border that goes all the way around it. And there's one more thing here that I'll point out, and you can do border radius as well if you want to give it kind of rounded corners instead of just flat square corners. So if I do maybe 8 pixels on that and then save it, you can see now the corners around that are no longer a hard edge. It's kind of like a rounded edge. And the bigger the radius you give it, the more round that's going to look. So if we take that from 8 to 12 and then save that, you can see now it looks even rounder. And then 16, it's looking pretty round by there. So border radius is how you can control that. But again, this is a lot of stuff to type out. There's actually a shorthand way to do this too. So if I comment out all of that and I come down here and I say border, and then all I really have to do here is say 2 pixels, double, and then purple. And if I just do it like that, where I do the width and then the style and then the color and save that, you'll see that I get the exact same thing, because this one line right here is going to be shorthand for all 3 of those lines. So there you have it. We've covered padding, we've covered margin, and we've covered border. Hopefully this lecture has been helpful for you, and we will definitely see you in the next video.